Hey guys, well, welcome to another Known Experience podcast. We are excited to have with us today James Hetfield from Metallica. No, not really, but John definitely looks like him. You're a dead ringer, man. He shaved his mustache in honor of our guest today. It's Max Skinner. He's the community development manager for Movember, and John had a beard as of 30 minutes ago, but he shaved it off, and he is just looking good. You're
Let's
looking
go,
good,
buddy. He's ready to mow.
Right.
He is. This is a horrible thing, but my wife is so anti the mustache that Movember is a tough thing in our house.
Join the club, and I work here.
Oh man, but truly, Max, thanks for joining us. I know it's a busy time, ramping up. It's right around the corner. So yeah, straight from California, right? That's where you're at right now?
Yeah. We're in our Santa Monica office here in LA. Movember has offices spread throughout the world. Our headquarters is actually in Melbourne, Australia, where it started 20 years ago. We have offices in London, Dublin, Toronto, LA, and New York. So it's a global operation, and yeah, a lot going on. About a week out from the big campaign, but always happy to spread the good word about Movember. So I appreciate you guys having me.
So I was surprised to see, I was looking at the financials, right? And I think 2021 is the latest that you guys have the snapshot, but $90 million globally. I had far underestimated the reach, right? I mean, your global fundraising is 4 times what is just done in the US alone. So it's definitely a global movement, not just something that's a US thing.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it started off literally in a bar. A couple guys, our 2 founders, the Garoni brothers, were just having a beer in a bar in Melbourne, Australia. And I think one of their friends was actually going through breast cancer battle, and they saw the amount of support and resources that were pouring in for their friend when it came to breast cancer awareness. And they felt that men's health was kind of being brushed under the rug a little bit. And I think one of their friends was actually battling prostate cancer at the time. And they felt like they wanted to bring more awareness around that cause. And, obviously October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. There's a ton of other awareness months sprinkled throughout the year, but there wasn't anything dedicated, strictly and solely around men's health. And they wanted to bring more awareness to men's health, holistically. And so that's kind of how Movember was started, fairly organically. Just a couple guys chatting over a pint of beer, and it's grown into a global movement of more than 6 million fundraisers around the world in the last 20 years. So it's come a long way, a lot more work to be done, but it helps having conversations like this and helping get the word out.
Yeah, I've seen your commercials. I saw one just a few minutes ago, actually. And those of you that are listening, you've probably seen them. You probably have said, what is this massive chrome mustache? It's like Burning Man meets Napoleon Dynamite meets like Scientology. What is this about? Tell us about this movement, and what are your emphasis of helping with men's health?
Yeah, I mean, you're fairly spot on the whole marketing push. It's definitely been a head turner for us. As I mentioned, Movember started 20 years ago, so we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year, which is super exciting. It's amazing to see how far we've come over the years. I mean, since we started, we've raised over $1 billion for men's health programs, community health partners. So it's really come a long way, and the whole new campaign creative is kind of in celebration of that whole global movement that we've seen over the last 2 decades. I think with the campaign creative itself, we've tried to get a little cheeky, and we always try to keep things light and modern and kind of progressive here at Movember, because our whole thing is like trying to meet men where they're at, right? Where they're most comfortable and speaking their lingo. And so the campaign creative is just kind of a cheeky, fun little marketing piece that we've played with to try to tap into a younger audience. Ultimately, our causes affect men across the spectrum, depending on your age or demographic. For example, we have 3 key focus areas that we fund and support. It started off with prostate cancer, which is the number one cancer among older gentlemen. In fact, 1 in 8 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer at some point in their lives. Unfortunately, it's a fairly alarming statistic, but luckily, with our help and with some of the programs that we've funded over the years, that number is getting higher. So there's way more readily accessible tools at our fingertips, thanks to some of the programs and support that we've done. So prostate cancer is, key focus area for us. Testicular cancer is another cause area of ours. That's, the most common cancer among younger men, as you can imagine. Super preventable disease. Thankfully, if you catch it early enough, you feel something off, you go get tested. Seems pretty straightforward, but that's something that we preach. If something feels off, just go to your doctor, get it checked out, and most, 9 times out of 10, it'll be very preventable and fairly easy recovery. And then the last piece that we focus on, that we actually introduced about 5 years ago, right before the pandemic, was around men's mental health and suicide prevention. Seems to be kind of a major crisis point in our country right now. 3 out of 4 suicides are made by men, unfortunately. And for whatever reason, more men are going to therapy now more than ever before. But for whatever reason, the suicide rate among men continues to rise, like kind of in correlation with that other statistic. So something's not working, whether it's traditional therapy or whatever it may be. But regardless, there's a lot more work to be done, and we're kind of at the forefront of all these different programs and health initiatives. So yeah, those are our 3 core focus areas.
What brought you to this company, right? I think there's, when you take on a role like this, it's not just, a development job or a sales job. There has to be a greater reason why you landed here. So what's kind of your story, and what was the gravity that brought you to this position?
Yeah, totally. Like a lot of my colleagues and folks that work at Movember, we've all been, touched by one of our causes to some degree, whether through a loved one or a friend of a friend. I think everyone pretty much walking around on a daily basis is touched by, especially mental health and suicide to some degree. And that's actually where my passion for nonprofit work started, in the suicide prevention space. I was living in Boston at the time. This was about 8 years ago. And unfortunately, my mom was battling heavy depression and anxiety. And unfortunately, depression got the best of her, and she ended up taking her own life one day. And I was fresh out of school, bushy-eyed 21-year-old kid. And my world was, turned upside down like that. And I was an only child, and I was kind of left to pick up the pieces after my mom passed. And that was obviously a catalyst for me to do something with purpose in my life, and to build something meaningful. And at the time, I was, actually working in sports marketing. I was with the Red Sox for a bit, and with DraftKings when I was in Boston, and kind of woke up one day and it just didn't feel like what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And I wanted to build, something with purpose and something meaningful. And I actually broke off and ended up starting my own company. It was kind of a consulting business for small to grassroots nonprofits at the time. And our whole goal was to get younger people more engaged and more active with nonprofit work, just kind of tapping into their heartstrings, right? And we were, doing a lot of event marketing for, small nonprofits around New England. And then COVID hit, and obviously couldn't do in-person events anymore. And so I shifted the model to more of a crowdfunding platform at the time. And we got a little involved in blockchain and Web3 and that whole Ponzi scheme. And so I ended up, actually developing some tech that I sold to a third party. And in the process of offboarding that startup, my wife and I moved out to LA right after we got married, just to start fresh. And during that offboarding process, this job at Movember opened up, and it felt like serendipity in a way, because the timing just worked out perfectly. Mental health was still involved. And keep in mind, at my last company that I was running, mental health and suicide prevention was a focal point for us. I think we ended up raising like $300K for various suicide prevention partners around New England over the years. So for me, that was incredibly rewarding. And for me, like at Movember, it was just the most natural segue. And having honest, vulnerable conversations like this, or with community members who have been through similar experiences that I had with my mom, to me, like that's the most rewarding thing at the end of the day. And that's why I work here.
John, you had something. I cut you off earlier a
Oh
little.
no, it's all right. I mean, I feel like we need to cut each other off more, Sean. I feel like this needs to be more like Smartless, where we're just roasting each other constantly, and we're way too nice. This is just boring the hell out of people.
I wish I had a Sean in my life to cut me off.
Yeah,
That's what my wife's for, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have some of those men's suicide statistics handy, Max?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned one earlier. 3 out of 4 suicides are made by men,
Yeah.
so about 75%. I mean, that's our biggest kind of call to action, and obviously very alarming. I think we're waiting on a ton of research, especially since the pandemic. I believe I could be mistaken, but I believe a report is coming out in early 2024 with some more recent learnings and findings with the pandemic in mind. And
Mhm.
as I mentioned, I know for a fact, and I don't have this number on me right now, but I know more men are going to therapy than ever before.
Mhm.
And then the suicide rate for men continues to climb. So all very alarming, but that's why we're here, right? That's why we're having
Mhm.
this conversation, and that's why we do the work that we do here at
Yeah.
Movember.
Do you, we mentioned traditional therapy, which, I'm a supporter of, but I know it doesn't fix everything. And we actually had a therapist on a few episodes ago. But for yourself, what else have you found really helpful for you in your own journey with mental health, and obviously what struggles you've been through with your family? What's been helpful for you?
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, like after my mom passed, I went through hell mentally, to say the least, as any young kid would, or older person would, for that matter, when they lose their mom. Like, that's your matriarch, that's your rock, and it was kind of shattered. And in return, or in exchange, my world was kind of shattered to some degree. I had just entered the workforce, so I was kind of not trying to navigate those waters for the first time as well. So it was a lot of unknowns and uncertainty that I was trying to battle through. And for me, I turned to alcohol and drugs and all kind of the negative habits that you can imagine as a young kid who just lost his parent. And luckily, I ended up finding, I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, and I found a therapist down there. And she was kind of a grief support traditional therapist, with a focus on mindfulness and meditation and breathing methods and all that good stuff. And honestly, that really saved my life. Just using some of her groundworking tactics. Just when I felt a panic attack coming on, just digging my feet into the ground, doing the 4x4 breath work, breathing through my stomach. That saved me in those little moments, and as a result, helped me build habits, positive habits, and positive habitual patterns over time that I still use today. Granted, I'm in such a better place, but therapy certainly helped. Support for my friends and family, that goes without saying. And then honestly, getting involved with nonprofits. I mentioned, the startup that I created, but that wasn't my first touch point with suicide prevention work. There was this organization called Samaritans based out of Boston, and I ended up like running their 5K, their annual 5K one summer. And that was my first exposure to nonprofit work. And honestly, man, like crossing that finish line along with other suicide survivors and other families who had been touched by suicide was one of the most fulfilling experiences I'll probably ever have. Like, immediately filled with tears, emotions. They had a whole ribbon wall, like we were talking about earlier. They had a ribbon wall that people would write in memory of a loved one that they lost. And that whole event was, again, kind of a catalyst for me to get involved in nonprofit work. And so, like, I guess I encourage anyone that's struggling or going through a difficult time, or having lost a loved one, you got to get your hands dirty, and you got to jump into the weeds that might feel very uncomfortable. But for me, that was the best way to move on and to give back and to help other people who experience something that I had experienced. Like, for me, traditional therapy certainly helped. Getting involved with the cause that flipped my world upside down really helped.
Hmm. Have you found that there's been an increase in like men's willingness over the past couple of years to take part in your events? Again, I historically I've known about you guys for years, and it's always been with the guys I know to be a little bit passive, right? They just like growing the mustache, and it's like a passive thing, which is fine, but it's very guy in the
Yeah.
approach, right? It's like, I'm going to grow the mustache. It's going to be funny. We're going to be bros for a month. But the content was a little lacking, right? So how do you guys break through that? And have you seen that kind of increase the past couple of years?
Great question. Totally warranted question. Obviously, the mustache is that's our walking billboard, right? That's what people know us for, especially when you talk about Australia. Like, it's a very well-known brand over there, as opposed to the States. Like, we have some brand perception stuff to work on over here. But regardless, that's what people know Movember for, right? Ultimately, like, we want people to think of the mustache like they do the pink ribbon for breast cancer awareness. Again,
Yeah.
it's our walking billboard. But it really goes deeper than that. I talk about community and why people get involved and their motivation and passion for whatever our causes are. I think ultimately, the mustache, I don't want to say it's gotten a little stale over the years, but to your point, like, the marketing and content has kind of played itself out a bit. And we're always trying to find ways to innovate and get people involved that go beyond just, raising money for men's health, right? We have one initiative called Mow Your Own Way, which basically encourages folks, gives them carte blanche. They can raise awareness however they see fit. So, for example, we had this one guy who's a professional skydiver, and he actually broke the Guinness Book of World Records for most time skydiving naked, and all he had was a Movember flag. And he did that 63 times in 24 hours, skydiving naked. And like, that's like a microcosm of like how people in our community get involved. Like, we have people that make like Movember scented candles, or they'll sew like a Movember themed quilt and auction that off. And so I like using the naked skydiver as an example, just to show you like kind of the unique ways that people get involved beyond just raising funds or growing a mustache. So we
Yeah.
try to keep it fresh, try to keep it unique, but ultimately it's up to our community.
Yeah, I saw that you last year you guys did a few international trips too, which looked pretty cool. And maybe I'm wrong, but it was like you had to raise $10,000 essentially to go on the trip, and that was it. But they were pretty spectacular trips.
Yeah, no, we have a whole adventure series. Last year, we I think there was about 12 or 15 of our community members, and including a couple colleagues of mine, that climbed Mount Killy. And in order to be eligible to climb on behalf of the organization, you have to raise like $10,000 as like kind of like an entry fee. So it definitely finds the most passionate folks. But that my manager Greg actually ended up climbing Mount Killy with the rest of the folks, and he said it was one of the coolest experiences. As you can imagine, when you hit that peak, everyone's filled with so many different emotions, because they're all there for various reasons. But yeah, man, there's a bunch of different ways to get involved. We have a marathon series. We're actually going to be part of the Berlin Marathon next year, which is exciting. We've been doing, the New York and Chicago Marathon the last few years. So Keith and our team has really done a good job of expanding that adventure series. But yeah, to your point, man, there's a lot of different ways you can get involved, which is the cool part about working here.
Hmm.
Yeah, forgive me. I'm still stuck on the physiology of the naked skydiver.
Get that image out of your head.
It was not just the flag that was waving in the wind. That has got to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, man, I can't imagine.
I want to look at, on your website, you talk about 5 things for men to know and do. And I'd like to highlight those, because I think for men listening to this could be really helpful, because I know that they're helpful to me. And the first one is spend time with people who make you feel good. And I know the last time I really had a bout with just discouragement and hopelessness, I for the first time was really intentional about reaching out to people and spending time with them, just one-on-one, just to be with someone and talk, which sometimes is easier to just shut down and kind of withdraw. And that was really helpful to me. And the second one is similar: talk more, talk about it. Don't just bottle it up inside. Before we move on to the others, I'd like to hear what you guys have found in helpful, and just when you're struggling, just getting together with somebody that you know and trust and talking to them about it.
It's huge, man. And you touched on it, John. Like, as men, we tend to shove our emotions down and we don't necessarily open up until it, bubbles up in a negative fashion at some point in our lives. I'm guilty of it. I think ultimately, whatever whatever it may be, I think men were kind of wired, like almost socially wired, to have this masculine connotation with our lives, where we don't feel necessarily comfortable seeking help or being vulnerable. And I think cutting through all the bullshit and cutting through the noise to have conversations like this and to open up is so incredibly important. And I'd like to think that narrative has kind of shifted over the last 5 years, especially since the pandemic and we were so isolated by nature. I think men have become a little more comfortable opening up. At least those are kind of my passive learnings, having worked at Movember for a year, which has been super encouraging. I mean, just having conversations with our community members, and they tell me right off the bat why they get involved or what they're dealing with. And hearing that firsthand is really encouraging for me. We have a model here at Movember that we kind of abide by. It's called ALEC. It's around mental health. ALEC: ask, listen, encourage action, and change. That's something that we kind of preach to our community members. Whenever you're speaking to a buddy or a loved one who might be battling something, they're probably not going to give you a peek behind the curtain. So it's really important that you ask them as many questions as possible. We're all very intuitive human beings. We know when someone's struggling, especially if it's a good friend or a loved one. When they're down in the dumps. You can tell by their body language or their eyes or whatever it might be. So we really encourage folks to ask questions and then to listen and encourage action. That's kind of a model that we live by, that seems simple on paper, but it's super powerful if you try to intertwine it with your daily life.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think even for me, that works better, right? I tend to not offer a lot when, just if I'm feeling something internally, I'll try and work. And John's heard this before. I try to work through it, solve the problem, and sometimes that works. But I don't often, I might start a conversation, but I don't say why I'm really starting that conversation. Right. I hope we actually get there, but I don't offer that on the front end. And that's a pretty chronic issue. But I don't think I'm alone in that. Right. I think that the whole asking is so critical, right? When you have people, because then if you're a truthful person and you respect a relationship, you'll answer it honestly, even if it is uncomfortable. But it's a lot less uncomfortable than you pursuing someone, and then it almost feels like, for me, like desperation if I bring it up. But if they ask, it's not, you know.
Totally. But sometimes you got to kind of pull it out of your friends, because again, like
Yeah.
men, they're not going to want to share, and they're not going to want to be vulnerable. And there's actually a really good tool that we use here. It's called Movember Conversations. And if you go to movember.com/conversations, it's a great tool that helps you kind of kickstart those difficult conversations with your friends who might be struggling and you don't know where the hell to start. It creates a dialogue for you, and you could plug in whatever the prompt might be. Like, my friend is having suicidal ideation. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start the conversation. And Movember Conversations will basically populate a dialogue and talking points for you to utilize. So I really highly recommend checking out that tool, because it's a great starting point. Because to your point, man, it's tough to have those conversations, especially if the other person on the other end isn't willing to share or open up. So Movember Conversations is great in that facet.
Ask, listen, encourage action, and check in. I like that a lot. I want to finish up these 5 things that you suggest here. Spend time with people that make you feel good, talk more. 3 is know your numbers. Know what you should be concerned about statistically, health-wise. Talk to your doctor about it. 4 is know thy nuts. I'll just leave that. That's pretty self-explanatory. But I do think it's interesting, because you see stuff for, like mammograms and like self-checks for women everywhere. It's common, but you don't hear about it for men. And that's something we have to talk about.
Totally. But at the end of the day, we all know our bodies better than anyone. And whether you're in the shower, washing your peaches or whatever it may be, and you're feeling around and something doesn't feel right, like, it's really straightforward and simple, but just go get it checked out. Like ultimately, you know your body better than anyone. So that's kind of where Know Thy Nuts comes from. And then know the metrics. We always preach from the mountaintops about some of these alarming statistics, not to scare people, but we're trying to light a fire and kind of create a little bit of urgency where, especially in prostate cancer, right? 1 in 8 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer at some point in their lives. A lot of people have a family history of prostate cancer. You might be, genetically predisposed. It's good to know those things so that you know when to get screened and to go talk to your doctor to see when, what age you are genetically predisposed or when you're. So we always say like know the metrics because it helps being proactive about your health. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna throw myself under the bus a little bit here. You guys are you're gonna laugh at me. So a lot, man, I don't know, 15 years ago, I had an issue. And like my left nut hurt so bad that I couldn't walk. So I'm sitting on the couch and I'm just like, dude, something's not right. So it gets good and like it's manageable enough that I can go to the library. So I'm with the library I'm at the library with my wife and she's off and I'm like just Googling it. I didn't tell her about it. And I'm like Googling, testicular cancer and I'm reading about it. And I'm kind of a hypochondriac, right? So I'm like, oh, I definitely got it. I got it. I think I was 27 at the time. I start getting the cold sweats, right? Like this panic attack in the library. I'm in Nashville at the time, John. And I get up and I almost pass out because I have myself so worked up that I have testicular cancer and I have to lay down on the floor of the
Oh no.
of the library because I worked myself up so much. I didn't end up having it, but it is one of the funniest memories about knowing you're nuts and when you think you have something you don't get over the ski over your knees.
I had a similar scare, man. Actually, like this time last year, I had just started working at Movember, and I was going through the old onboarding training, know thy nuts, all that language, and I was taking a piss one night and was feeling around down there and felt a lump, and like my stomach just dropped. Like I'm sure the similar feeling you had, like doom scrolling on WebMD, but
Yeah.
holy smokes, I like tried to go back to sleep after, I couldn't sleep that night, like woke up my wife like freaking out, ended up getting checked out. It turned out to be a benign cyst, thankfully. But that first week or so before I knew the blood results it was horrible. It was like daunting, and like my stomach, my heart was in my stomach, and
Yeah.
it's scary, man. But again, like if you catch something feels off, just go get tested. Like it probably won't end up being anything like you and I.
Yeah. Right.
But I mean, I think a lot of men are really reluctant to go to the doctor for anything. And
Yeah.
so I think this is a good just reminder to men out there, just go to the doctor, just get it checked out. Better to know now than to find out later, right? Like there's nothing, you don't benefit in any way by putting things off.
Correct.
So know the numbers, know when you need to get your colonoscopy, all that kind of stuff. Know your nuts. I think most of us do pretty well. And lastly, move, which I really like this. Move throughout the day. If you're in the office, at lunch, if you can go for a walk around the block at lunch. I was dog sitting for somebody recently and I work from home and I was like, this is nice. It makes me go outside 3 times a day and walk a few blocks. And I think it's just good for your mental health. It's good for everything, right?
Totally. I mean, it's completely correlated. It sounds simple on paper, but exercise has a direct correlation to your physical and mental health. So that's one thing we encourage all our community members to do. In fact, we have a whole Move for Movember initiative where we challenge folks during the month of November to run or walk 60 miles for the 60 men that we lose to suicide every hour around the world. So we've been on this call for, let's see, 46 minutes. Since we've been on this call, we've lost 46 men to suicide, unfortunately, around the world. And so that move for Movember Challenge is, just to put it into perspective, it's always a very powerful piece and encourages people to just get out there and get your legs moving, man. But yeah, you nailed it, John.
Wow.
Yeah.
60 men an hour throughout the world. That's just
One a minute. It sucks, but that's why we do the work that we do, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Very sobering. Well, tell us how you've given us a few ways people can get involved. What can we do more than grow a mustache? And how do we use that to promote Movember and what you're doing?
It's a month-long fundraising challenge, and we have a global network of about 6 million supporters that get involved every year, and it's absolutely fantastic. Ultimately, any sort of awareness that you're willing to do, whether it's through a skimpy mustache or a beautiful Fu Manchu like you got there, John, like the mustache is such a good conversation starter that's our walking billboard. That's kind of our bread and butter, right? But it goes a little deeper than that. We have many different ways to get involved. I mentioned the Move Challenge, so folks can actually keep track of their distance and how many miles or kilometers they've walked directly through our mobile app and directly through the website. So if you go on to Movember.com or download the Movember mobile app, you can set up a Mo page, an account for yourself, and you don't necessarily have to fundraise. You can keep track of your however many miles you run or walk next month. And you can actually sync up with a fitness app or Strava or whatever. So that's kind of a cool feature we have in-house. You can host an event. You can mow your own way. As I mentioned earlier, you could go skydiving naked if you want. Whatever it takes to raise awareness holistically about men's health. There's a lot of different ways you can get involved beyond just raising funds. So encourage folks to just go to our website, Movember.com, sign up, create a page, register. And once you get registered, you'll be in our communications funnel, and you'll get more information about our causes, where the money's going, the different programs that we support, all that good stuff. So yeah, that's a good starting point. Just going to our website and learning more.
Well, thanks so much, man. Thank you for taking the time. John and I really appreciate it. This is why we do what we do too. Just a greater effect on men's health and a holistic approach and relationship. And so we're right there with you, just on a different set of ears maybe, but it's good to have guys across the world this coming month that have the same intention. So we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity. And, it helps having folks like you in our corner and spreading the good word, not only about Movember, but about men's mental health and all these important topics. So really appreciate what you guys are doing. And yeah, we're always happy to help support you guys as well.
Awesome.
If you're listening, hang on. We're going to come back in just a few minutes after Max goes away. We'll come back with after the interview. We haven't done one of these in a while. Sean, I have a feeling this one's going to be really controversial. So,
okay. All right, Max. We'll see you later, man.
All right, fellas. Appreciate the time. Talk soon.
Yep.
Thanks. Very controversial.
I don't know what I was trying to say. All right, welcome back for after the interview. I don't know why I said controversial, Sean. I think I was trying to think of what's the word I was looking for? Sensational or, provocative, maybe.
Provocative.
Yeah.
Well, I know that your new camera has, it has your faces in such great detail now. I just can't stop.
That's a problem for me. Man, how about this guy skydiving naked 60 something times?
Holy moly.
Do you think he could continue to procreate after that? That's
some velocity.
Yeah.
That's some drag.
Flapping is all I'm thinking about. Flapping in the wind.
Man. Yeah. It is great to see a movement like this go for so long though. I think that's a really cool part about it. We talked about how the mustache is overplayed, but listen, man, it's like the pink is going strong for the ladies for breast awareness. It is, if that is the flag, that could last a generation or multiple generations, right? So it's cool to see. It's amazing to see the worldwide movement, right? I think that was a really surprising thing for me to see the majority of their support is international. And maybe it's just in Australia, the vast majority of that. But yeah, very, very cool to hear about
I
their work.
wonder how much the hipster embracing of the ironic mustache has watered down their brand, or maybe they caused the movement. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's not like you don't automatically see some guy with like a waxed up curly mustache and think, oh, he must be taking part in Movember. You just think he's another
Yes.
one of those guys.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no judgment here of those guys, by the way.
Yeah. Oh man. But I think the one of the takeaways obviously was the staggering number, but also to see this is what they do, right? And we are in a weird time it, with men's health to understand what's going on, right? Even these guys, it seemed like they don't know either, right? With this kind of crossroads we find ourselves, or this increase in focus on mental health, but also this increase in the decision to end one's life. Or so I think it's fascinating and tragic, because I don't know what the outcome is, right? Studies will give us an indicator of what the problem is, but what's the solution? I think will take a lot of work
Yeah.
from a lot of people. I also didn't get a touch on it, and I was going to ask. It was in my notes, but just the numbers on research dollars for men's health, right? I have no idea compared to women. What is the actual focus and money going into mental health and physical health, right? I was surprised that I'd always assumed that Movember was predominantly mental health. I didn't realize it started off as physical, right? Prostate and testicular. That was actually new to me.
Well, what's interesting to what you're saying is the number of dollars raised for different issues versus the number of people who die from different issues is radically different.
Hmm.
So, for instance, like the number one fundraiser is breast cancer,
Sure.
$257 million.
Right.
Um, while the number one killer is heart disease, 596,000 people versus breast cancer, 41,000 people.
Wow.
So
So
the numbers are almost flipped. For heart disease, the
12
fundraising
times.
is 54 million to 596,000 deaths. And for breast cancer, it's 257 million raised for 41,000 deaths.
Wow. So it's 12x the number of deaths, but like what, 80% less
Yeah,
fundraising.
I don't know the math other than knowing those are drastically. And with suicide, there's 3.2 million raised for suicide. There are almost as many suicides as there are deaths from breast cancer. 39,000 suicides.
And
So
how many of those are men?
39,000 suicides with 3.2 million raised, 41,000 breast cancer with 257 million raised. And that's nothing against breast cancer
Yeah, yeah, right.
fundraising. It's just certain topics are much more
Yeah.
attractive to give towards or more easy for people to connect with.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think we see heart disease more as a lifestyle issue. So we're not as graceful towards it
Sure,
as
right.
whereas breast cancer is something that people, is
Right.
probably genetic and they really can't do much about.
Hmm. Yeah.
The first encounter I ever had with suicide was when I was in high school. Maybe no, I think a freshman in high school, and a friend of mine that I was in youth group with. I had slept over at his house, helped him run his paper route. My mom just came in one morning and said, Toby killed himself, and that just rocked my world. As like a 13-year-old, you just don't 14, whatever we were,
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
think about a friend doing that, especially somebody you've been to their house, their dad, their parents seems to be like a relatively like healthy environment. Have you had a brush with that in your life?
Not close friends.
Mhm.
I've known people, but they weren't part of my close circle. But yeah, yeah. And I think the sad part is, well, I don't want to say it makes sense, right? Because then it says that insinuates that normal people don't struggle with it. But a lot of the ones that I heard about made sense, right? There was a circumstance, or you knew the person and you're like, oh yeah, there was some red flags. But I think those are the easier ones, right? When it does make sense. And I think that's where, for the normal guy that has a good life that's struggling with it, they don't even want to bring it up because they know that their life is probably good. And so it feels wrong to even say that you're struggling with it, right? Because you do have all the boxes checked, right? You're not a social outcast. You're not, a heroin addict. You're not homeless. You haven't been fired from your job, right? You're living a normal life, but you're struggling with it. I think that's actually a really hard place to be. Those other places are extremely difficult as well, but they make sense, right? So I'm just saying, for the guy, and even for me, in seasons where you're dealing with a depressive state, you feel like an idiot for feeling depressed, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the greater challenge with these conversations for me, is for all of us, is to meet that guy. There was this ad, and there's these two guys, two best friends at a soccer game, and it showed them every Sunday, just clips. And like, one guy was like super enthusiastic and he was pumped. The other guy was just sitting there watching when the goal was scored. And then the super enthusiastic guy had an empty seat, and they put a flag on his seat. But the somber guy, so like the whole commercial, you're like, oh, the somber guy is the one that's going to commit suicide. And it's the guy that showed no signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was a happy friend at the game. He was high-fiving people. And it was a really powerful commercial, right? Because we all assume the quiet guy, but we never ask the normal guy if he's all right too. Because that very well may be a coping mechanism, right? Just in how he projects himself. Anyway, that was kind of a long, but
Yeah, we never know where our friends are at. And I think it's a good reminder to us to ask for help, and Sean, not make them ask you, like they can read your mind. Your wife can do that. I can't do that, Sean. So
yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
I think it's a good time to interject that there was something that happened last year, that in this past year, that a lot of people, some friends of mine, have been working on for a long time. And that's a national suicide hotline, and it's 988, and it's immediately connected to a counselor or somebody to help you talk through what you're dealing with. And I think what you said is really important, Sean. A lot of times we will shame our own pain. Like, we'll beat
Mm.
ourselves up over the fact that we're hurting and think, I shouldn't feel that way, or I should be more grateful. And then we feel even worse than we did to start with. So if that's you, we can relate, and just encourage you to reach out to somebody for help. At the very least, we'd say you could reach out to us, John at knownexperience.com or Sean at knownexperience.com. We would be there for you in a heartbeat. So
Yeah. I think the real challenge too, if you're busy, and John knows this as my friend, I'm 5 months into a very new busy season, and you really can, I forgot how quickly you can fill your life with tasks, because there's always tasks and there's always people. So if you have a busy life, don't let that busy kind of numb a lot of what's going on inside, because it's easy to kind of get disconnected from what you're doing. And I know that I feel that, and it's only been 5 months, right? Like, when I have a bad day, I just get busier, because it's way easier to focus on a task than it is to call John. So anyway, but well, it's a good one, guys. I think there's always hope, right? There's always hope. There's always people. I think that's one of the really important things that we have to remind ourselves. As lonely as life can feel, that's hopefully not the reality for you. Hopefully there is someone, or many people in your life that will ask. And if they can't ask, that you can just show up and be around them, as John said he does, right? Going with people, that just being in the presence of people he knows cares. So we encourage you to do that, and to really nurture those relationships in the good time, in good times, and lean on them in the times when you may not have the strength yourself. So let's go into November remembering that, supporting each other, and yeah. And if you want to support Movember, if you don't, just support your brotherhood. Right. It's not just about them. I think that's what was made clear today. It's about Men's Health as a whole, not just their organization. And they believe that. Obviously, we believe that. So, but it's been good. We thank you for listening in. Please share the podcast. Let us know on Instagram or shoot us an email if you have any great guests that you think would be of benefit to what we're trying to do here. So go into your week, be encouraged, and we hope you continue to experience the power of being known.